Before making the trip, I had braced myself to witness some really desperate conditions, but I don't think anything could have prepared me for the heart-wrenching situation that I saw there firsthand and the different accounts that I heard from the people I spoke to. Everywhere you looked around the camp, misery stared right back at you. I mean, I saw families who were crammed in flimsy bamboo shelters, sometimes upwards of 50, 60 people in a small shelter. I saw, otherwise they had pitched makeshift tents in mud. Everybody was scrambling for space, for scarce resources, food, water. It was really quite horrific what I saw. About 95% don't have access to clean water. 3/4 are not getting enough food. And of course, health services are stretched very, very thin. And everywhere I looked, I saw children. There were so many children. And very often, most of them actually were not accompanied by caregivers or their families. When I spoke to them, I heard harrowing stories of how they'd seen siblings, how they'd seen their moms or dads being shot right before their eyes. So nothing could have possibly prepared me for the terrible conditions that I saw there and the unimaginable acts of violence that had been committed against these people.
You even said, I've heard of babies being kicked around like footballs. And we've also heard that there is a huge and flourishing sort of underground, sex trafficking market going on in some of those camps.
Sadly, that seems to be the case. There has been systematic gang rapes of girls, schoolgirls trapped in schools and raped by soldiers. I spoke to one aid worker who told me of a 16-year-old girl who had been raped 20 times. And also when I spoke to some of the health workers there, they were telling me how very often they saw wounds in the back of people. So they're actually being shot as they were trying to escape. I've heard accounts of a mother who had witnessed her nephew being cut into pieces and thrown into fire. So this seems to be a systematic persecution of a group of people. I think it's nothing short of ethnic cleansing what's going on there. And it's just, unfolding before, in full view of the world, and it's just going unabated and being received really with a great deal of indifference.
You've also said that if it was Muslims as the perpetrators instead of the victims, perhaps, the tables would have been turned and there would be a different response.
Well, look, the persecution against the Rohingya did not start in August. It has been going on for decades. And I think, there is something to this. Over the last couple of decades, the terrible actions of a minority of Muslims on the fringes of Islam, in fact, we think they're altogether outside of Islam, have led to a rise in anti-Muslim sentiment around the world and of negative stereotypes of Muslims, to the point where many around the world cannot even conceive of Muslims as being victims. And yes, I do wonder sometimes that if it was the Muslims who were committing these acts of violence, whether the world would have reacted with the same apathy and indifference. I really think we need to ask ourselves this question, because what we're seeing now is persecution by extremists of another religion. So extremism is extremism, and it has to be met with the same kind of reaction. We have to stop it wherever it exists.
What do you make of Aung San Suu Kyi's spectacular fall from grace over this issue?
Well, I find it very sad and disheartening that someone like her, who has historically stood for so much good, is now being associated with such brutality and violence. The Rohingya people are being denied the very freedoms that she fought so hard for and sacrificed so much for. And so, we would just love her silence is actually quite deafening, because not only has she not condemned the acts of violence, she has yet to recognize these atrocities.
What would you ask her to do in this regard, especially since this inter-ethnic fighting has been endemic in Myanmar, and there is a very virulent, as you know, ARSA, Rohingya group that sparked the latest round in August?
Well, one thing that she possesses a lot of is her moral authority. She has the power to stand up and speak out against these atrocities. And I hope that she will do that. And regardless of who sparked what, I think the reaction of really attacking an entire population and forcing hundreds of thousands of innocent people to flee their homes is just not the appropriate reaction. I think the root causes of the suffering of the Rohingya people need to be addressed. And she herself had once said that wherever suffering is ignored, there will be seeds of conflict. So I think the reaction, or the solution to this, should be not to aggravate the problem further, but to try to deal with it through dialogue and reconciliation, and to really address the reasons why there has been such systematic a campaign of dehumanization of this minority that has gone on for so long.
Queen Rania, thank you so much.
Thank you, Christiane.